Hi, my name's Alistair Somerville, and this is a talk I gave at Service Design in Government in Edinburgh called What Lies Beneath? Future Problems of Truth and Power in Design. My name's Alistair, and if you need to get hold of me, you can easily find me on Twitter at acuity_design. All the slides and all my work are prototyped in public. Now, before we start, and just to make sure that you're able to concentrate and think about things, I like to do a visceral check-in. And this is to just make sure that you're aware of how you feel and how you feel about the place you are. So there are 4 questions. How do you feel today? So what are the sort of stresses and strains? And how do you feel physically, the aches and pains? Just take a few moments to think about those. The second question is, do your senses feel overwhelmed? This is really just to make sure that you're not sort of disturbed by the light or the sound or the smell of the place that you're in, and it's worth moving things around just in case there's certain things which are making it difficult to concentrate. Third question is, do you feel comfortable in this place? There is the fundamental question of, are where you're sitting or lying or whatever comfortable? Should you be in a different place? Maybe you should be outside or inside. Maybe it would be better to be somewhere where you can get a coffee, the kitchen, or a cafe. So just make sure you're in the right place to be able to feel comfortable and able to concentrate. And finally, are you happy with the number of people here? A lot of these talks I give are in large halls with many, many people. But also it's worth thinking, are you happy with the number of people? Do you want more people in the room with you? Do you want to sit with your family or colleagues and listen to this? Or do you want to actually have fewer people around you? Do you want to actually have some solitude to be able to concentrate? So all of this visceral check-in is just to make sure you take care of yourself. Your ability to concentrate is based around your visceral sense of your own body and emotions and your sense of your place socially and physically and in the architecture. So just be aware of your needs. So if you need to change things around, then pause the video and do what you need to. And come back to me. This is a recording. Now, before we start, just close your eyes for a few moments. Take a big breath in. Let it out. And now, open your eyes. Let's start. So, this is a talk about service design and government. Just to start, you need to understand where I come from in work. I come from areas of work, specifically I came out of museum accessibility and design. So the things you can see on our screen are 3D model of a death mask, which we made for a project in Worcestershire, and then a map, which is a tactile map. I do a lot of work in creating objects and maps and diagrams for people with visual impairments. That map is in the Imperial War Museum. Building on that, I have to do, because of the work I create, design, I have to do a lot of usability research because the kind of work I create must be tested with users with specific impairments. And so a lot of the work is about usability. And so that's led to a number of projects where I've been working on usability research. In the pictures you're seeing here, there's the one at the top, which is a project in Leeds about enabling communication between people who are isolated in their own rooms in a care home because of their physical impairments. And the communication, a mesh network system to help people talk to each other. And on the bottom, that's a system called Wayfinder, which was developed for guiding visually impaired people through underground systems using beacons, so systems where GPS was not available. Finally, I do a lot of workshops and I work experientially. So the workshops you can see there are some of the stuff that I do. I've been working in human transcendence, ideas of awe and personal transformation in the UK and the US. In the middle, that's co-design. There's a number of workshops where we're working around the ideas of power in co-design. And finally, there's workshops on mixed design, mixed reality design, and the ideas of how do we design information environments when people are moving through augmented and virtual spaces. But deep down, what I care about is quite simple. I care about accessibility for many human needs, many human capacities. I care about perception of information in many places, whether they be physical or whether they be virtual. And in particular terms for this workshop and this talk, I'm interested in power in design and how it is shared by many. So, the way this is going to be organised, and we'll be doing this as an online discussion, is I'll talk, and this is this video, and then you can have a chat, you talk together with colleagues over however long it takes, wherever you are, by phone, by Skype, however. And then later on we'll talk together. We'll use a Hangout or a Zoom to be able to have a chat about some of the ideas and some of the things which have come out of what I've said in this talk and what you've discussed in your conversations. Now, the talk is about looking forward and how service design looks forward. But to start with, we're going to have to look backwards, because a lot of the future comes out of the past. And the past is problematic. Now, when I do accessibility projects, and I do accessibility projects in large museums and with some large organisations, there has always been this slightly weird thing when accessibility is only an issue which comes up near the end of the project. So 3-year projects where I can get called in probably in the last 4 months. And it seems as though accessibility is not central to the projects and the people managing the projects. And therefore one begins to question, why is there a problem with accessibility and when it occurs in projects? Because it always seems to be later. It always seems to be just at the edge of the project, at the end. And that's because, and this is why I have this talk, it seems to be that there is a specific bias in the design language and the tools that are used to create products and services. Because particularly in accessibility, you'll find people talk of edge cases and they'll talk of normal. They'll talk of these things as though those are normal is the thing that they should be designing for. And edge cases are these slightly strange things that they'll get around to later. And having looked at this for a while, what keeps coming up is that there seems to be a severe bias in the tools and the way in which people use the tools for design. So there's this idea that there is a central idea of norm, and then any differences are edges, that the perspective is centered on normal, and therefore any viewpoint which is alternative is from an edge, that there is a space which is right and there is a space which is wrong. And you see that again in the way that normal distribution datasets are biased. Yes, the average may be at the top of the curve, but there is this idea that on one side, you're talking about people who have superior capacities, and on the other side, there are those people with inferior capacities. And there is this slight bias towards enabling things for those people who are superior, because those people who are inferior are, again, not normal. They're at the edges, and therefore there is this difficulty of supporting them. And finally, you see this in A/B testing, because A/B testing has this habit of creating a binary, and the binary is always going to be biased towards normal and not normal. And normal in these cases, when you ask only between two options, will always get you to the thing which supports the normal. And so you see this bias in the design tools and the data sets, which creates this bias towards a certain type of person and a certain type of society. And it's creating a problem, because it means that the tools we use are designed to exclude. And it also means that design tools are designed to create convergence to normal. So you see, looking backwards, service design has an issue that it's using problematic tools. The things it's creating the services today with have problems. And the problems are very, very deep. And it's useful to actually look at some context and also to look at some of the history to understand why there are these problems and why they have effects now, which are really, really painful. I'm just going to look at a couple of areas. I'm going to talk about anthropology and I'm going to talk about psychology, because a lot of the tools which we use today in service design, and we use a lot in other types of design, are based in these areas. So you see, anthropology is very interesting because it was a methodology of talking about so anthropology was a really useful system coming out of the 19th century. And it's a methodology which is important because it was centering the idea of discovering the meaning of culture and meaning of society by doing user-centered research, by actually embedding with people to understand how and why they do the things they do. This idea of being embedded in a culture, embedded in a society, in order to understand it better, is incredibly valuable. However, because of the timing of anthropology, a lot of anthropology in the 19th century is also caught up very, very seriously with colonialism, because that is how people were able to get to these foreign countries, to meet many of these different cultures. And there became a number of problematic quid pro quos. In order to understand the matriarchal societies of Southern Africa, the anthropologists were employed in order to understand and research it. But the reason they were being paid to do it was in order to understand how to colonize, take over those areas. The anthropology was actually a tool of colonialism, a tool of imperialism, because it enabled those people with power and privilege, to take over. And of course, this reflects through the tool set to today. And so you see co-design, which is a very, very good tool of modern design. The idea that you actually work with a community, work with people with lived experience to understand their problems and to be able to create solutions with them. But there is this problem that because anthropology, because the design tools have this background, There are elements of control and exploitation in them, and you need to watch for them. The tools are dirty. Methodologies are clean, but the tools, the way in which you do it, can go places and do things that you may not expect. And it's a momentum that's inherent in the tool set, and you need to watch the way the tools take you to places you did not intend. Now in psychology, again, psychology out of the 19th century is incredibly useful because it thinks about issues of human behaviour and human cognition, both of which are entirely valid areas for work in service design. However, again, because of the period in which it developed, psychology has dark areas, particularly how eugenics and psychology were very, very closely tied together in the early 20th century. The head of the British Psychological Society and the head of the eugenics movements were the same person on at least two occasions. They are connected, and the connection creates issues today. So you see it in the way that psychology and behavioral psychology has a slight bias towards enabling control, particularly over those without power. You see it in nudge units, you see it in behavioral design. It has a habit of being working from those with power, financing, the use of the techniques to be able to change the behavior of those without power. The bias remains. The second bias, which comes out of eugenics and comes out of a lot of long history, particularly going back to poor laws and ideas of sorting, is the idea that there should be better services for better people. Those people who deserve more should get more. And that psychology and the tools of psychology can be used to sort between those who are deserving and those who are undeserving. This creates problems. So, looking backwards, there is bias in the tools of service design because it is using tools which come out of anthropology and psychology, and there is specific bias in what they attempted to do in the past. It creates a bias in the present. And this is the absolutely fundamental problem. The design tools and academic research prioritize the needs and maintain the power of white men. It is a very, very specific bias that we're looking at. The tools are developed and maintain these privileges. And if you don't look out and spot for the way in which this is occurring, you will keep maintaining this power and this privilege. Now, looking forward, there are a number of possible issues for service design. Now, in the future, rather like anthropology and psychology became the bias that we live with today, the possibility is service design becomes the bias and the tool in the future, that it takes on the equivalent biases that we see in the present. So therefore, service design transforms from being a user of problematic tools into becoming a problematic tool in and of itself. So looking backwards, we have to ask, how do we divert from these possible futures because of the bias in the tools? How do we mitigate or eliminate that bias, which we've already seen is there? How do we create better tools? And looking forwards, how do we mitigate or prevent service design becoming a tool of bias? How do we create clear ethics that enable service design and service designers to spot when bias is being created and when it is becoming problematic? How do we actually create a system that means it cannot be used to maintain the power and privilege that is so problematic in our society? Now, it's useful to look to other people, other industries, to be able to think about analogous areas of people who might be having similar problems. And so service design isn't alone in having issues of bias and issues of supporting bias in the future. It is a shared issue amongst a number of the new industries and a number of the new research areas. And it's worth looking just for now at artificial intelligence and machine learning, because there do seem to be some issues there which cross over, and also some ideas which are coming out of those areas which might be useful to service design. Now, lately, for reasons I can't understand, I have been involved in a number of conferences with machine learning and AI researchers, particularly from Google and Microsoft. And it's worth looking at their approaches and how they differ. So Google is interested in the use of creating open and free tools, so Tensor, which is their machine learning system. And they work on the basis that transparency, that you can see what they're doing and you can see their tools, and therefore you can understand what they're doing, is the approach. Microsoft, however, and through their ethics department called FATE, are interested in the ideas of auditable tools, i.e. tools which are possible to break down what's occurring in order to understand why the results occur now. So looking at the data sets, looking at how the actual calculations and the machine learning systems work. And also that then links to the idea of intelligibility, that it's not that a tool is transparent and open, that it's actually intelligible, that you can actually understand why it makes choices or how the team who created it made decisions about how the tool works. Now, the Microsoft approach seems preferable to me because it does actually look at the ideas of how do we actually take responsibility and how do we take action to make sure the tools are comprehensible to other humans, to the people who aren't us, who aren't the developers. Now, there's two ideas which are specifically mentioned by Microsoft which are of interest. Number one, they talk about a basic ethical flaw. And the ethical flaw comes up in a research paper called Data Sheets for Datasets, which is interesting, and you can download a copy which has some examples from archive. What they're looking at is being upfront and clear in your paperwork, in the research paperwork, white papers as they're sometimes known, in terms of what you're attempting, how you're attempting it, and talking about how that then can be used in the future. So by being very, very clear and very, very open now in terms of writing down intelligibly what's going in, what you were thinking, and what you were attempting to create, it's possible for people to come back through history to find it in order to be able to then map out what happened and why it happened in the future. The other thing is, of course, the data sheets are signed so that you are findable. Your responsibility starts now in the project, but goes into the future in the way in which you can be found and the way in which people can then talk to you about what's happened. The second idea is a frame. And this comes to the idea of interpreting interpretability. And there is a research paper on genwv.com about this. And what they're looking there at is the idea that you create either within the project process a mechanism for people to be able to audit it, so they can come back through and understand the steps of the project and understand the steps you took in order to be able to discover where a mistake may have occurred. Or, and this is more to do with machine learning, the idea that they can create automated tools that can actually sweep backwards through the system to be able to find biases which the humans themselves did not notice. I have to say the latter is more to do with a technical sense of projects, but the former is more useful in terms of making sure the project processes are separated in terms that means that people can audit and break down the process, i.e. it's interpretable, it's intelligible, because it's auditable. Now this leaves us to the point where you can have a discussion. So the first discussion is to be able to talk with colleagues and family, friends, anyone you feel like, about some of the ideas which have come up in this, in order to then discuss in the future online, in a meetup or on Zoom, the ideas which are coming up. So, discussion points. Two things. First of all, better tools. How can you actually think about the tools and the ways in which you're working now, both the tools you're using and the processes in which you're working, to actually stop the biases which we know do occur? How can you actually think about the tool sets and think about the biases which are in there already? Second question, clear ethics, looking forward. How do you talk about changing the processes, the project, paperwork, project methodologies, so that you can actually be responsible to the future? How do you actually think about making processes which are intelligible and auditable? How do you break the project up so that future generations, both within your organization or outside of it, can actually come back through and understand why you made the choices you did, why the things which may have negative consequences in the future, why they occurred, so that people can fix things. So, have a discussion, and then come back and we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about your views and opinions later.